happened when I was 12. I shared a bedroom with my sisters, a cramped space that felt crowded even though we all got along. But on that night, something changed, something that still sticks with me years later. My brother was visiting, sleeping on the floor while my sisters and I slept on our beds. We were all tucked in, but I couldn't sleep. I was wide awake, tossing and turning like I was in a cartoon, the kind where someone can't settle and keeps flipping over. My body was tired, but my mind was still buzzing, refusing to shut down. At first, the sounds were harmless. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard faint noises, nothing sinister, just the hum of my imagination mixing with the usual night sounds. It was almost like being on the edge of a dream, but there were no images, just sounds. The kind of sounds you can hear in your half-sleep, like footsteps in the distance. But then it happened. The soft footsteps echoed in the room. At first, I thought it was just my brother moving. He was the only one who would be awake in the room at this hour. But then the steps stopped right by the door. I didn't open my eyes, I told myself I wouldn't. It was probably him just walking to the bathroom or getting something. No reason to be alarmed. Then the footsteps came rushing back. Fast. Almost like they were running, the sound growing louder with every step. And then the breath. It was slow at first, like the person was standing right over me, taking deep, deliberate breaths. I could feel the warmth of it on my face. It was so close I could almost feel the air brushing against my skin. My heart raced and I lay still, paralyzed by fear, telling myself to stay quiet, to pretend like I was asleep. The breathing continued for what felt like an eternity, each exhale growing more suffocating. I could feel it, hear it, just above a whisper, the warm, steady rhythm of someone breathing down on me as if waiting for something. And then the air went cold. The breathing faded away and the oppressive silence returned. I waited, still too afraid to open my eyes, too scared to move. Finally, after what seemed like forever, I opened my eyes, expecting to see my brother standing there, but he was still asleep on the floor. I don't know what happened that night. Was it a hallucination from being overtired? Did I imagine it all? Or was something else in the room with me, something I couldn't see but could feel with a terrifying clarity? To this day I still don't know. But I can still hear the breathing in the silence of the night, the feeling of something, or someone, breathing down my face while I lay there helpless. I know my mind must have been playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just too tired, or maybe it was my imagination getting the better of me. But the fear, it felt real. And it still lingers. When I was 12, my parents came home one day with surprising news. They'd bought a new house. My older sister and I were skeptical, but they were excited. It was a 2,164 square foot, single-level home, situated right off the fairway of a golf course. Spacious, with 4 bedrooms and 2.5 baths, it looked completely normal from the outside. But once we stepped inside, the strange vibes hit me immediately. The living and dining rooms were entirely baby blue. Everything from the carpet, walls, and curtains to the large white granite fireplace. I couldn't even comprehend how anyone would choose to paint the entire room in that color. Even more bizarre were the family rooms, decorated with the largest floral prints I've ever seen, blooms as wide as 2 feet with matching curtains. It was like stepping into a house that was stuck in the past, in a time when eccentric design choices went unchecked. But what really sent a chill down my spine were the bedroom doors. Every single one had a double-key deadbolt, the kind that could only be locked or unlocked with a key from both sides. I thought this was strange, maybe even unsettling. I remember crying, refusing to live there, telling my parents that whoever lived there before must have been insane. They reassured me that the previous owner, a woman who'd lost the house in a divorce, had let it fall into foreclosure. The house had been cheap, too cheap for its size. My parents promised they would renovate it and get rid of the creepy locks. It took months for the house to be renovated, but when it was finally done, it was normal again, at least on the surface. Tiny flecks of baby blue paint still clung to the rough granite fireplace, remnants of a design I could never forget. My parents didn't see what I saw. They didn't notice how something felt off. Eventually, my parents split up and it was just my mom, sister, and me left in the house. It didn't take long before I started hearing things. At night, I would hear footsteps, soft at first, starting from the back of the hall where my mom's bedroom was, moving slowly toward my room at the front. The first time I heard them, I turned on my light, looking up at the tiny hole in the ceiling just above my bed. I couldn't stop thinking that someone might be peering down at me from there. The footsteps stopped just outside my door, but when I checked the other rooms, I saw that all of them had tiny holes in the ceilings too. I kept hearing them night after night, the footsteps moving from room to room, always just out of sight. I stayed up later than usual, reading books, trying to ignore the dread that crept through the air as the footsteps drew closer. The house felt alive, watched even though I was alone. Things got even stranger. Items started disappearing and reappearing in other rooms. I would find my sister's things in my room, my mom's things mixed in with mine. It was like someone was quietly moving them around when no one was looking. No one believed me when I pointed it out, least of all my mom. The tension in the house grew unbearable, and then it got worse. One night, while we were eating dinner, my mom found pins in her mashed potatoes, just as she was about to take a bite. She was furious and accused my sister and me of trying to poison her. I didn't know how those pins had gotten there. Maybe a hole in the ceiling? But it terrified all of us. And things only continued to spiral after that. A few years passed, and one afternoon I came home from school, sat down in the breakfast nook, and began doing my homework. That's when I noticed the smell. It was strong, familiar. Old Spice. A cologne my dad had worn, but he hadn't stepped foot in the house for over 3 years. The smell lingered in the air, filling the room. My stomach turned in fear. I grabbed my homework and ran out to the backyard, where I did my work on the porch, hoping the golfers passing by would ease my nerves. An hour later, my sister came home, and I rushed back inside to tell her what had happened. We stood in the breakfast nook, sniffing the air. But the smell was gone. My sister dismissed it as my imagination, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. There were also times when the house would smell like something had died in the kitchen, especially on warm days. My mom would joke darkly, saying it was probably the previous owner. She disappeared shortly after the divorce was finalized. We'd been receiving her mail for years, writing "no longer at this address" on the envelopes and returning them. But sometimes I wondered if my mom was only half joking. Did she think the former owner was still here? Or was it something else entirely? Finally, after 5 years of living there, my mom decided it was time to leave. The house was too big for just the two of us, so we moved out. But then years later, during a family dinner, I mentioned how we'd lived in a haunted house. My boyfriend at the time had asked about it, and when I shared the story of the footsteps at night, my sister's face went pale. To my surprise, she told me she had heard the footsteps too. She'd heard them walking up and down the hall just like I had. We turned to my mom, who went silent. Her face turned white as a sheet. She then told us something that made my blood run cold. When the contractor was renovating the house, he went up into the attic to inspect it. That's when he found something: an old mattress, empty wine bottles, and a pile of trash. It seemed someone had been living in the attic. My mom said they cleaned it out but didn't tell us, knowing we already hated the house. Now, with so many unanswered questions, I can't stop wondering. Was someone still in the attic after the renovation? Were they the ones whose footsteps I heard at night? Had they been sneaking down into the house while we were away, moving our things around? Was that the reason for the cologne smell? The pins in my mom's food? The occasional smell of rot? Was it the former owner or someone else entirely? I'll never know. We were too busy fighting and not talking about what we heard at night. But those footsteps still haunt me even now. A few years ago, I was staying at my girlfriend's house in Southwest Florida. Her neighborhood was pretty decent, surrounded by a small golf course, with 18 houses arranged in a circle around a road. The houses were spread out, some with fences, some without, so it was common for people to cut through yards to avoid walking around. Her bedroom was on the left side of the house if you were facing it, with a window right in the center of the room, the bed placed next to it in the corner. Over the years I had spent so much time there, I practically lived in that room. But one night, something happened that still haunts me. We went to bed as usual around midnight, talking about random things and joking. We were both sound asleep by 2 or 3 a.m. when I suddenly woke up. I don't remember exactly how, but I found myself lying in bed, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. It was a scream, loud, harsh, and wild. But it wasn't a scream of distress. It was the scream of pure rage or madness, the kind of sound you would expect to hear in a horror movie. The scream was a woman's, but not one of helplessness. It was powerful, almost primal. I lay frozen in place, my body paralyzed by fear. I tried to make sense of it, but there was no sense. No distress. Just pure, unsettling fury. The scream came in long, agonizing wails, with only brief breaks that lasted no more than 3 seconds. At first, the scream sounded like it was coming from deep within the neighborhood, a couple blocks away. But with every second, it drew closer, louder, faster, as if something was running, sprinting toward us. I knew with a deep, gut-wrenching certainty that this was no ordinary person. This wasn't some old lady or someone who just lost their mind. This was something else. The sound grew louder, closer. It was as though it was moving right toward the house. My girlfriend woke up, immediately asking me if I was awake. I could barely answer. I was paralyzed, too terrified to move but desperate to listen. The scream was getting closer, but it was still more than a few houses down. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, but it didn't make sense. I whispered to her, "Just wait, wait." I wanted to be quiet. I wanted the thing outside to pass us, to just move on, but deep down I knew something was terribly wrong. The scream had reached the next street over, and I could hear the grass crunching beneath heavy footsteps right outside the window. My heart nearly stopped. I was convinced that whatever it was right there, close enough to look in. For a few seconds, maybe 5 or 10, it was quiet. We waited, holding our breath. Then the scream started again, only now it was further away, but still carrying the same twisted intensity. The thing was running again, retreating into the distance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the noise faded. We both let out a long breath, our bodies still tense with the adrenaline of the moment. My girlfriend and I stayed awake, talking quietly, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but we couldn't. The scream was unlike anything we'd ever heard. It was filled with rage, like a primal force out of control. It only lasted 3 to 5 minutes, but it was the most unsettling experience of my life. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of that scream. It lingered in my mind like a haunting echo. I know I'll never understand it, who or what it was or why it happened. The scream had no purpose other than to disturb. It didn't cause harm. It didn't try to break into the house. It simply screamed. And it was loud, powerful, terrifying. What kind of person, or entity, could do that? I thought maybe it was some prankster or a junkie on a rampage, but the way it moved, the confidence and force behind that scream, told me it was something more than that. Something that felt real but couldn't be explained. A part of me wonders if I'll ever get the answers. Maybe I won't. Even though I've researched other possible sources for this kind of scream, searching for animals or people who might make such noises, I found nothing close. This scream wasn't like anything I've ever heard. It makes me wonder if anyone else heard it too. Did they hear the same scream? Did they feel the same terror? I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was a presence, something powerful and unsettling, moving through the neighborhood. And even now, when I think about it, I still don't know what it was. I don't have a ton of scary stories, but this one has stuck with me. I'm in my early teens and I live with my little brother, a cat, and a dog. It all started about 2 months ago, and since then I still can't shake the feeling that something happened that night. Something that wasn't just in my head. It was late, somewhere between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. I was in bed trying to get some sleep, but I kept hearing strange noises in my room, faint sounds like something was moving around. At first, I thought it was my little brother messing around, so I told him to stop and go to sleep. I looked over at his bed and he was completely out, dead asleep. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The noises didn't stop. I pulled out my phone and texted my friend, telling him I was hearing weird sounds in my room while my brother was still asleep. He thought it was strange, but he didn't think much of it. I didn't either at first, so I tried to go back to sleep, assuming it was just my cat or the house creaking. But the noises kept going. The scratching, the movement, something was in here with me. Eventually, I managed to fall asleep. But when I woke up, I felt off. It was as if the air in the room had changed. I decided to get up and walked into the living room, still trying to shake the weird sensation. When I stepped into the living room, my mom jumped and I was confused. I didn't understand why she looked so startled until she told me what she had seen. She said she woke up in the middle of the night because the cat had suddenly jumped to its feet, its fur standing on end. That's when she saw it. A figure just like me walking out of my room. My mom thought I had been sleepwalking, as I've done that before, but she said this figure was too tall to be me. She couldn't explain it. The figure paused outside my brother's room, just standing there, before it turned and locked eyes with her. That's when my cat hissed and ran after it. My mom, terrified, got up and went to check where it had gone. The figure was gone. Just vanished. She checked my brother's room, but he was still asleep. She checked my room and there I was, just lying there, fast asleep, with no clue about what had happened. I had been hearing the noises again when I woke up, and I told her about it. I texted my friend again, showing him the messages I had sent earlier. He didn't believe me at first, so I tried to explain what I'd heard, what my mom had seen. But when I asked if anyone could explain it, why the cat had reacted the way it did, why it looked like a tall figure walking out of my room, no one could. The worst part? That thing went back into my room. Whatever it was hiding in there, moving around again just as I had heard it before. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't my imagination. And I don't think it was just my mom's sleepwalking theory either. If these stories send a chill down your spine, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales. You never know when the next horror story might be your own.